Mother Bear got trapped on a flooded bridge. What this baby did to save her brought everyone to tears. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The golden rays of sunset painted Pine Valley Park in warm hues of amber and orange. Families were scattered across the grassy meadow, some finishing late picnics while others packed up for the day. Among them, Olivia Reed sat on a checkered blanket, watching her 10-month-old daughter Ellie babble and reach for a monarch butterfly that danced just beyond her tiny fingers. Each time the butterfly fluttered closer, Ellie erupted in peals of laughter, her chubby cheeks dimpling with pure delight. "She's never going to want to leave," chuckled Olivia's husband, Nathan, as he packed away the remains of their afternoon snack. "I swear she'd stay here all night if that butterfly does." Olivia smiled, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Look how happy she is. I wish I could bottle that joy." Nearby, the Chen family's children chased each other with bubble wands while their parents dozed on a blanket. Two teenagers tossed a frisbee back and forth, their laughter mingling with birdsong. An elderly couple walked hand in hand along the path that bordered the dense forest at the edge of the clearing. It was the perfect summer evening, peaceful, warm, filled with the sounds of contentment. Until it wasn't. The first sign something was wrong came as a flock of birds suddenly burst from the trees, wings flapping frantically against the sky. Then came a deep, guttural sound that didn't belong in this idyllic scene. The elderly couple froze mid-step, their faces draining of color as they stared at something in the tree line. "Bear!" The man's voice cracked with terror as he shouted the warning, grabbing his wife's hand and pulling her away from the forest edge. Time seemed to slow down as a massive brown bear crashed through the undergrowth and into the clearing. Its fur was matted in places, and it swung its head from side to side, nostrils flaring. The beast let out another roar that sent electric pulses of fear through everyone in the park. "Oh my God," Nathan whispered, his eyes wide as saucers. "Olivia, get Ellie." But Olivia was already halfway to her daughter when the bear charged forward, causing her to stumble backward in panic. All around the park, people were grabbing children, abandoning coolers and toys, and running for their cars or the park entrance. Screams filled the air, drowning out everything except the heavy huffing of the bear as it pawed the ground. "My baby!" Olivia shrieked, her legs giving way beneath her as Nathan pulled her back. "Ellie!" Their daughter sat alone on the blanket in the middle of the clearing, directly in the bear's path. But something strange was happening. While chaos erupted all around her, Ellie remained transfixed by the butterfly that now hovered near her sun hat. She giggled again, a sound so pure and innocent that it seemed to slice through the panic like a beam of light. The bear paused, its massive head swinging toward the sound. "Don't move," whispered a park ranger who had appeared beside Nathan and Olivia, his hand moving slowly toward his tranquilizer gun. "Everyone, stay absolutely still." But no one could take their eyes off the terrible tableau unfolding before them, a giggling baby and a wild, agitated bear, with nothing but 20 feet of grass between them. The bear took another step forward, and then another. Ellie clapped her hands in delight as the butterfly landed briefly on her knee, completely oblivious to the danger approaching her. Her laughter rang out again, uninhibited, joyful, utterly free from fear. And then something impossible happened. The bear stopped, its massive head tilted to one side, ears twitching forward instead of lying flat against its skull. Another burst of Ellie's laughter echoed across the suddenly silent park, and the bear's aggressive stance softened almost imperceptibly. "What's happening?" Olivia whispered, her fingers digging painfully into Nathan's arm. "Why isn't it attacking?" The ranger didn't answer, his trained eyes fixed on the animal's body language. The bear lowered its head slightly, nostrils flaring as it took in the baby's scent from a distance. Everyone held their breath. 20 feet away, the bear took another step forward, then another, each movement slower and more deliberate than before. 15 feet, 10 feet. The monarch butterfly, as if performing a dance choreographed by fate itself, fluttered from Ellie's knee and traced a lazy path through the air, directly between the baby and the bear. Ellie's eyes followed it, her little body rocking with excitement. When the butterfly briefly landed on the bear's snout, the animal sneezed suddenly. The unexpected sound sent Ellie into fits of uncontrollable giggles. Her laughter, pure and uninhibited, rang like tiny bells across the meadow. And then, something even more extraordinary happened. The bear sat down, just sat down, like a pet waiting for a treat. "Oh my God," breathed the ranger. "I've never seen anything like this." From the edge of the park, phone cameras captured the unbelievable scene. Parents clutched their children tightly, some crying silently, others whispering prayers of gratitude that it wasn't their baby in the clearing. Nathan felt his legs threatening to give way beneath him. The paralyzing fear that had gripped him began to shift into something else, a strange, almost mystical wonder. "She's not afraid," Olivia realized aloud. "Ellie doesn't know to be afraid." The bear's breathing had slowed. It no longer huffed or pawed the ground aggressively. Instead, it seemed almost transfixed by the laughing child. When Ellie dropped her favorite stuffed rabbit, a worn blue bunny named Mr. Hops, the bear extended its nose cautiously toward the toy. "Don't move," the ranger cautioned, though the warning was unnecessary. No one dared break the fragile spell that seemed to have fallen over the clearing. The bear nudged the stuffed rabbit with its nose, then looked back at Ellie, who thought this was the funniest thing she had ever seen. She rocked back and forth, pointing and babbling at the enormous creature as if they were old friends playing a familiar game. Then came the most shocking moment yet. The bear carefully picked up Mr. Hops between its teeth, gentle as a mother carrying a cub, and placed it back on Ellie's lap. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. "This is impossible," muttered someone nearby. "Bears they can't." But there it was, happening before their eyes. The feared predator and the innocent baby, engaged in what looked remarkably like play. The ranger slowly shifted position, trying to get a better angle for a potential tranquilizer shot if needed. But the subtle movement caught the bear's attention. Its head swung toward the gathered crowd, and for a moment the tension returned. A low growl rumbled in its throat. Ellie, noticing the change, did something that made every heart stop. She reached out toward the bear, her tiny hand extended as if offering friendship. "No!" Nathan's strangled cry escaped before he could stop himself. But then a new voice cut through the tableau. "Timber! Timber, come here, boy!" A bearded man in his 60s emerged from the forest path on the opposite side of the clearing, his weathered face creased with worry. He wore a flannel shirt despite the summer heat, and walked with a pronounced limp. At the sound of his voice, the bear's ears perked up. "Oh, my lord!" the man called out, seeing the crowd for the first time. "Please tell me no one's hurt. Timber!" To everyone's astonishment, the bear looked toward the man, then back at Ellie, seemingly torn. The baby giggled again, waving Mr. Hops in the air. Is that your bear?" The ranger's incredulous question carried across the clearing. "He's a rescue," the man explained, limping forward cautiously. "Raised him from a cub after his mama was killed by poachers. He's never hurt nobody. Got loose this morning when a storm damaged his enclosure." I've been tracking him for hours." Understanding dawned across faces in the crowd. Not a wild bear, but a semi-domesticated one, still dangerous, certainly, but explaining some of its unusual behavior. But it didn't explain everything. "He doesn't usually take to strangers," the man continued, watching with clear amazement as Timber remained sitting calmly near Ellie. "Never seen him so gentle with someone he don't know." Olivia's fear began transforming into something else, a fierce maternal pride. "It's her laugh," she said. "It's always been special. I just never realized how special." The ranger maintained his cautious stance. "Sir, I need you to secure your animal immediately. This is a public park, and regardless of how well-trained you believe it to be, this is a serious violation of multiple wildlife regulations." But as the man approached Timber, calling softly, something unexpected happened. A sharp crack sounded from somewhere near the parking lot. A car backfiring or a door slamming, and the peaceful tableau shattered. The bear, startled by the sudden noise, let out a roar and reared up on its hind legs, towering over tiny Ellie. Screams erupted again. Nathan broke free from the ranger's restraining arm and sprinted toward his daughter, certain he was running to his death but unable to stop himself. Olivia's scream tore through the air. The ranger raised his tranquilizer gun. And then, in that frozen moment of horror, the unthinkable happened. Ellie's face crumpled. The sudden noise and chaos frightened her at last, and she began to cry, not the gentle whimper of a mildly upset baby, but the heartbroken wail of a child whose perfect world has suddenly shattered. Her arms reached out blindly, searching for the comfort of her parents. The bear froze. The terrifying roar died in its throat. For 3 eternal seconds, the massive animal stared down at the crying infant, its expression almost confused. Then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, Timber lowered himself back down. Not onto all fours, but all the way down, pressing his belly to the grass, making himself as small and non-threatening as possible, a classic submissive posture. He inched forward on his belly and very gently nudged Ellie's leg with his nose, as if trying to comfort her. Nathan skidded to a stop 10 feet away, torn between the instinct to snatch his daughter from danger and the stunning realization that the bear was somehow trying to soothe her. The ranger held his tranquilizer gun steady, but didn't fire, captivated by the incomprehensible scene unfolding before him. "He thinks she's a cub," the bearded man said softly, limping closer. "He's treating her like a distressed cub." Ellie's cries began to soften as she looked down at the massive head now resting near her tiny feet. Curiosity overcame fear. She hiccuped once, twice, then reached out a pudgy hand and patted the bear's nose, a gesture so innocent and trusting that several onlookers began to weep openly. "I need to get my daughter," Nathan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, tell me how to approach without setting him off again." The old man nodded. "Move slow, talk gentle. Timber was raised around people, but he's still a bear with bear instincts." "Sir, I cannot allow," the ranger began, but Olivia cut him off. "That's our baby," she said, her voice like steel despite the tears streaming down her face. "And somehow, that bear is protecting her now. Let my husband try." Nathan took a deep breath and began to move forward, one agonizingly slow step at a time. "Hey there, big guy," he murmured, keeping his voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. "That's my little girl you've got there. I just want to thank you for watching over her." Timber's eyes, surprisingly intelligent, tracked Nathan's approach. The bear made no aggressive moves, but remained in his submissive posture beside Ellie, who had now stopped crying entirely, and was entertaining herself by gently patting the coarse fur on the bear's head. 5 feet away. 4, 3. Nathan knelt slowly, now eye level with his daughter and the enormous predator guarding her. "Ellie, sweetie," he said softly, "want to come to Daddy?" Ellie looked up, her face breaking into a radiant smile of recognition. "Da, da." She held up her arms, ready to be picked up. But then, in a gesture that would later be viewed millions of times on social media, she placed one tiny hand on Timber's head as if to say goodbye, and said what sounded remarkably like bear, one of the few words in her limited vocabulary. Nathan reached out and gently lifted his daughter into his arms, half expecting the bear to lunge at any moment. But Timber remained still, watching with what could only be described as gentleness as the man backed slowly away with the child. Olivia ran to them as soon as they were a safe distance away, enveloping both in a fierce embrace as tears of relief poured down her face. My baby," she kept repeating, running her hands over Ellie as if to reassure herself that her daughter was truly unharmed. The old man approached Timber with a lead and collar. "Come on, boy, time to go home." To everyone's relief, the bear stood and allowed himself to be secured without resistance. The ranger stepped forward, his face a complex mixture of emotions. "Sir, I'm afraid there are still serious legal consequences for—" "Officer Jenkins?" A woman pushed her way through the crowd, holding up a badge. "Dr. Samantha Chen, Wildlife Conservation Department. I believe I can offer some context here." The ranger looked surprised. "Dr. Chen? What are you doing here?" "I was having a picnic with my family when this happened," she explained, gesturing to the Asian family Nathan had noticed earlier. "But more importantly, I recognize this man and this bear." She turned to the bearded man. "You're Michael Hargrove, aren't you? From the Black Mountain Sanctuary?" The old man nodded, looking relieved. "Yes, ma'am. Been running the sanctuary for 30 years now." Dr. Chen turned to the ranger. "Mr. Hargrove has one of the few permits in the state for rehabilitating potentially dangerous wildlife. Timber here is actually part of a groundbreaking study on bear cognition and emotional intelligence. His escape is unfortunate, but I can vouch for both the legality of Mr. Hargrove's operation and his impeccable safety record. Until today, of course." The ranger lowered his tranquilizer gun, though he still looked skeptical. "That doesn't change the fact that a dangerous animal was loose in a public park." "No, it doesn't," Dr. Chen agreed. "And there will need to be a full investigation, but I think we can all agree that what we witnessed here today was extraordinary." She looked over at Ellie, now happily playing with Mr. Hops in her mother's arms, seemingly unaware that she had been at the center of a potentially tragic situation. That baby's laugh. Michael Hargrove shook his head in wonder. "In 40 years of working with bears, I've never seen anything like it. It was like it spoke to something deep inside him." As the immediate danger passed, the crowd began to relax. Park visitors who had fled to their cars ventured back, eager to see the now docile bear. Children pointed and whispered. Parents hugged their little ones tighter. The evening sun cast long shadows across the grass as the ranger spoke with Dr. Chen and Mr. Hargrove about the proper protocols for removing Timber from the park. Nathan and Olivia sat on their picnic blanket, still shaking from the adrenaline, unable to let Ellie out of their arms even for a moment. The baby, for her part, seemed perfectly content, occasionally looking over at Timber as if they shared a special secret. "I always said her laugh was magical," Olivia whispered, stroking Ellie's fine blonde hair. "I just didn't realize how literal that was." As they watched Timber being led away, a woman approached them hesitantly. She was in her early 30s with kind eyes and a camera hanging around her neck. "Excuse me," she said softly. "My name is Rebecca Winters. I'm a journalist with the Pine Valley Gazette. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions about what happened here today?" Nathan and Olivia exchanged a glance. They were exhausted, emotionally drained, and wanted nothing more than to take their daughter home and hold her close for the rest of the evening. But something in the journalist's expression, a mix of genuine wonder and respect, made them pause. "What kind of story are you planning to write?" Nathan asked cautiously. Rebecca smiled. "An honest one, about a moment when the barriers between humans and nature seemed to disappear, about a baby's laugh that somehow spoke a language a wild animal could understand." She hesitated. "Look, I know you've been through something incredibly traumatic, and if you'd rather not talk about it, I completely understand. But I think people need to hear about moments like this, moments that remind us how connected we all are." Olivia looked down at Ellie, who was now yawning sleepily against her chest. "Will you make it clear that we're not suggesting people should let their children near bears? That this was a one-in-a-million situation?" "Absolutely," Rebecca nodded seriously. "The last thing I want is for anyone to think this is typical bear behavior. It wasn't. It was extraordinary." Nathan took a deep breath. "Okay, we'll talk to you, but not tonight. We need to take our daughter home and process everything that happened." Rebecca handed them her card. "Of course, call me whenever you're ready, and thank you." She glanced at Ellie with a soft smile. "Your daughter is very special." As the journalist walked away, Nathan wrapped his arm around Olivia's shoulders, pulling his family close. "She has no idea," he murmured. But as they packed up their belongings and prepared to leave the park, neither Nathan nor Olivia noticed the monarch butterfly that had started it all, now perched on a nearby flower. Nor did they see it take flight, its orange wings catching the last rays of sunlight as it followed the path where Timber had been led away, as if drawn by some invisible connection to both the bear and the baby. A silent witness to the miracle that had unfolded in Pine Valley Park that ordinary summer evening. 3 days later, Rebecca's article appeared on the front page of the Pine Valley Gazette under the headline, "Laughter in the Face of Fear: How a Baby's Joy Tamed a Bear." The story quickly went viral, picked up by national news outlets and shared millions of times on social media. The grainy cell phone footage of Timber returning Mr. Hops to Ellie became the most watched video of the month. Experts appeared on television to debate what had really happened. Animal behaviorists offered theories about the bear's unusual response to the baby's laughter. Some suggested that the high-pitched sounds might have triggered some protective instinct in the bear. Others pointed to Timber's unique upbringing by humans as the explanation for his gentle behavior. But Michael Hargrove, when pressed by interviewers to explain the bear's actions, simply shook his head and said, "Some things in this world don't need scientific explanations. Sometimes innocence and joy speak a language that goes beyond words or theories." That baby's laugh, it touched something primordial in that bear, something that remembered innocence. For the Reed family, the attention was overwhelming. Their phone rang constantly with interview requests. Well-meaning strangers left gifts on their porch for the Bear Whisperer baby. Television producers offered substantial sums for exclusive rights to their story. "This is insane," Nathan said one evening, after declining yet another interview request. "They're treating Ellie like some kind of miracle child." Olivia looked up from where she was playing with their daughter on the living room floor. Ellie was showing no signs of trauma from her close encounter. If anything, she seemed more joyful than ever, her laughter filling their home from morning until night. "Maybe she is," Olivia said quietly. "Not in some supernatural way, but Nathan, you saw what happened. Her innocence reached something in that bear that all our fear couldn't touch. There's power in that. Power we adults have forgotten how to access. Nathan sat beside them on the floor, watching as Ellie stacked colorful blocks only to knock them down with squeals of delight. I keep thinking about what could have happened, he admitted, his voice catching. If that bear had been truly wild, or if Ellie had been crying instead of laughing when he first approached her. Olivia reached for his hand. But that's not what happened. And maybe it wasn't just luck. Maybe there's something about pure joy that speaks to all living creatures. Their reflective moment was interrupted by the ringing of the doorbell. Nathan sighed, expecting yet another reporter or curious neighbor, but when he opened the door, he was surprised to find Michael Hargrove standing on their porch, looking uncomfortable in clean jeans and a button-up shirt that seemed a size too large for his wiry frame. "Mr. Hargrove," Nathan said, instantly recognizing the bear's caretaker. "This is unexpected." The old man shifted from one foot to the other. "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to check on the little one and to apologize properly for what happened. I haven't been able to sleep much, thinking about what could have gone wrong." Nathan hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. "Please, come in. And there's no need to apologize. If anything, we should be thanking you for raising such a gentle bear." Olivia looked up in surprise as Nathan led their visitor into the living room. Recognition dawned in her eyes, and she instinctively pulled Ellie a bit closer. "Mrs. Reed," Michael nodded respectfully. "I understand if you're uncomfortable with me being here." But Ellie had other ideas. At the sight of the visitor, she let out a delighted squeal and held up her stuffed blue rabbit. "Bear," she announced proudly, her limited vocabulary making unexpected connections. The tension broke as all three adults laughed. "Not quite, sweetheart," Olivia said, relaxing slightly. "This is Mr. Hargrove. He takes care of the bear. Please, call me Michael," he said, lowering himself carefully into an armchair. His movements revealed the pronounced limp they had noticed in the park. "I've been working with rescued wildlife for over 30 years, but I've never seen anything like what happened with Timber and your daughter." "Is Timber okay?" Olivia found herself asking, surprising even herself with the genuine concern she felt for the animal that could have killed her child. Michael's weathered face softened. "He's fine. The authorities have completed their investigation and allowed him to remain at the sanctuary, though I've been fined for the inadequate enclosure that allowed him to escape." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I've come because I have a proposition for you both, one that might sound a bit strange at first." Nathan and Olivia exchanged glances. "What kind of proposition?" Nathan asked cautiously. "The Black Mountain Sanctuary is primarily a rehabilitation center for injured wildlife, but we also conduct research on animal cognition and behavior. What happened between your daughter and Timber, it's unprecedented. Dr. Chen, you met her at the park, believes it could provide valuable insights into ursine emotional responses and interspecies communication." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Olivia asked, a protective edge creeping into her voice. Michael held up his hands. "Nothing that would put your daughter at risk, I promise you. We were hoping you might consider bringing Ellie to the sanctuary, under completely controlled conditions, to observe if her presence has a similar effect on some of our other rescue animals, particularly those that have shown signs of trauma or aggression in the past." The request hung in the air between them. Nathan's immediate instinct was to refuse outright. The mere thought of deliberately placing Ellie near wild animals after their terrifying experience seemed absurd. "I know how it sounds," Michael continued, reading their expressions, "but the sanctuary is equipped with proper safety barriers. Ellie would never be in an enclosure with the animals. We're simply curious if her laughter, from a safe distance, might have a calming effect on some of our more troubled rescues. Why Ellie? Olivia asked, watching as her daughter crawled across the carpet to retrieve a toy. What makes you think her laugh is special compared to any other child's? Michael's eyes crinkled at the corners. Mrs. Reed, I've worked with dangerous predators my entire adult life. I've seen bears kill without hesitation when threatened. What happened in that park wasn't normal. Your daughter reached something in Timber that I've never seen accessed before. Maybe it was just a perfect storm of circumstances. His familiarity with humans, her particular laugh, the butterfly creating a moment of distraction. But I believe there was something more at work. Before either parent could respond, Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. "This is my granddaughter, Sophie," he said, handing the picture to Olivia. It showed a smiling little girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, with Michael's same crinkly eyes. She has a rare form of autism that makes verbal communication difficult, but she has always had an extraordinary connection with animals. When she was about Ellie's age, we noticed that injured birds would calm in her presence. Squirrels would eat from her hand. Even our most skittish deer would allow her to approach. Olivia studied the photograph, feeling a subtle shift in her resistance. "Where is Sophie now?" A shadow passed over Michael's face. She's 17 now, and her connection with animals is still remarkable. But as she grew older, the world became more overwhelming for her. These days, she rarely leaves her room except to visit the sanctuary animals. He took back the photograph, his fingers tracing the image lovingly. I've always wondered if there are other children with this gift. This ability to communicate without words, to reach the wild parts of creatures that most humans can't touch. Nathan sat beside Olivia on the couch. Even if we were interested, and I'm not saying we are, wouldn't any observations be scientifically compromised? Timber already knows Ellie. There's history there. Timber would not be part of these initial observations, Michael clarified. We have other rescued bears with no previous exposure to your daughter. The comparison would actually be quite valuable from a research perspective. It still sounds risky, Olivia said, but her tone had softened. Michael nodded. I understand your concerns completely. May I suggest a first visit where Ellie doesn't interact with any animals at all? Just tour the facility, meet our team, see our safety protocols. Dr. Chen would be present along with our veterinary staff. You'd both be with Ellie every moment, and you could leave at any time if you felt uncomfortable. Nathan was about to decline politely when Ellie, who had been playing quietly nearby, suddenly looked up at Michael and said, with perfect clarity, "Bear? See bear?" The 3 adults stared at the child in astonishment. Ellie had not yet begun forming sentences, her vocabulary still limited to about a dozen individual words. Yet here she was, expressing a clear desire that seemed directly related to their conversation. "Did she just?" Nathan began. "Children often understand more than we give them credit for," Michael said softly. "And sometimes they know what they need better than we do." Olivia and Nathan exchanged a long look, one of those wordless communications that develop between couples who know each other deeply. Finally, Olivia turned to Michael. "We'll visit the sanctuary, just to see it. No promises beyond that." Michael's face broke into a relieved smile. "That's all I ask, thank you." As he stood to leave, Ellie crawled over to him and held up Mr. Hops. Michael knelt despite his bad leg and gently shook the stuffed rabbit's paw. "It's a pleasure to meet you too, sir," he said seriously, making Ellie giggle, that same musical sound that had somehow tamed a bear. At the door, Michael paused. "There's one more thing you should know," he said quietly, so that only Nathan could hear. "The butterfly that was with your daughter that day? We've seen it at the sanctuary. Same distinctive wing pattern, one slightly tattered edge. It's been near Timber's enclosure every day since the incident." Before Nathan could respond, Michael limped down the porch steps toward an old blue pickup truck parked at the curb. Nathan watched him go, a strange feeling settling in his chest, something between wonder and unease. The following Saturday dawned clear and cool, a perfect late summer morning. The Black Mountain Sanctuary was located about an hour's drive from Pine Valley, nestled in a secluded wooded area at the base of its namesake mountain. As Nathan turned their SUV onto the long gravel drive leading to the main compound, Olivia read aloud from the brochure Michael had left them. Founded in 1988, Black Mountain Wildlife Sanctuary specializes in the rehabilitation of injured or orphaned native wildlife, with a particular focus on large predators that cannot be released back into the wild due to human imprinting or permanent injuries, she recited. The sanctuary is not generally open to the public, instead focusing on research, rehabilitation, and education through controlled school programs. "That explains why I've never heard of it before," Nathan said, navigating around a pothole. "Looks like they prefer to keep a low profile." "Look, Ellie," Olivia said, turning to the back seat where their daughter was securely fastened in her car seat. "We're going to see where the animals live." Ellie kicked her feet excitedly, clutching Mr. Hops to her chest. Ever since the incident in the park, she had been inseparable from the stuffed rabbit, as if the toy had taken on new significance after being handled by the bear. As they approached the main building, a large, rustic structure built of logs and stone, they saw Michael waiting for them on the porch, alongside a woman they recognized as Dr. Chen, and a younger man in a white coat. "Welcome to Black Mountain," Michael greeted them warmly as they parked. "I'm so glad you decided to come." Dr. Chen stepped forward, extending her hand. Up close, she was younger than she had appeared in the park, perhaps in her early 40s, with intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. "Mr. and Mrs. Reed, it's good to see you again under less stressful circumstances. And this must be the famous Ellie." Ellie, normally shy around strangers, beamed at Dr. Chen and held out Mr. Hops as if introducing the rabbit. "And this is Dr. Marcus Winters, our head veterinarian," Michael continued, gesturing to the younger man, who nodded politely. "Dr. Winters?" Nathan repeated. "Any relation to Rebecca Winters, the journalist?" The veterinarian smiled. "My sister. She mentioned she'd met you after the incident. She's actually here today as well. Not in a professional capacity, she promised. She just couldn't resist seeing Ellie again." Nathan felt a flicker of suspicion. "We didn't agree to any media coverage of this visit." "And there won't be any," Dr. Chen assured him firmly. "Rebecca is here strictly as Marcus's sister and a friend of the sanctuary. No cameras, no interviews." As if on cue, Rebecca emerged from the main building, her friendly face breaking into a smile when she saw them. Unlike their brief meeting in the park, she now wore jeans and a casual sweater, her camera conspicuously absent. "Welcome," she called. "I hope you don't mind my being here. I just wanted to see how our little hero is doing." She knelt to Ellie's level, keeping a respectful distance. "Hello there, Ellie. Do you remember me?" Ellie regarded her solemnly for a moment, then broke into a smile and held out Mr. Hops, her standard greeting, it seemed. "I'm honored to meet your rabbit," Rebecca said seriously, shaking the toy's paw as Michael had done. "Is this the famous Mr. Hops I've heard so much about?" Olivia looked surprised. "How did you know his name?" Rebecca straightened up, looking slightly embarrassed. "Oh, I must have included it in my article after interviewing you." But Nathan was certain they had never mentioned the rabbit's name during their interview with Rebecca. Before he could question her further, however, Michael was ushering them toward the main building. "Let's start with a tour of our facilities, and then we can discuss the research project in more detail, if you're still interested after seeing everything." The main building housed administrative offices, a medical clinic for the animals, research laboratories, and a comfortable common area where staff apparently gathered for meals. Through large windows, they could see various enclosures spread out across the sanctuary grounds, each designed to mimic the natural habitat of its occupants as closely as possible. "We currently house 17 bears, 12 wolves, 4 mountain lions, various birds of prey, and dozens of smaller mammals and reptiles," Dr. Chen explained as they walked. "All of them have been deemed non-releasable for various reasons. Injuries that would prevent survival in the wild, illegal pet situations that created too much human dependency, or behavioral issues that would make them dangerous in their natural habitats." They paused at a window overlooking a large enclosure, where a black bear was leisurely climbing on a complex structure of logs and platforms. "That's Luna," Michael said. "She was confiscated from an illegal roadside zoo, where she was kept in a cage barely larger than she was. When she first arrived, she paced constantly, a stereotypic behavior common in captive bears with inadequate space. It took nearly a year of rehabilitation before she would even use the climbing structures we built for her." As they continued the tour, Nathan noticed something odd. In nearly every area they visited, he spotted the same monarch butterfly, or one that looked remarkably similar, fluttering near windows or resting on plants in the indoor garden areas. Once might have been coincidence, twice a curious recurrence, but by the fourth sighting, he was certain there was something strange about the insect's presence. When they reached the research wing, Dr. Chen took over as guide. "This is where we analyze our observational data and conduct non-invasive studies on animal behavior and cognition," she explained, showing them a room filled with computers and video monitoring equipment. "We never force the animals to participate in research. All observations are made in their normal living environments, with protocols designed to enrich their lives rather than stress them." "And where does my daughter fit into all this?" Olivia asked directly. Dr. Chen exchanged a glance with Michael before answering. "We have several animals that have proven particularly resistant to rehabilitation efforts. Despite years of gentle handling and positive reinforcement, they remain aggressive or fearful of human contact. We're curious if Ellie's presence, specifically the sound of her laughter, might elicit a calming response similar to what we observed with Timber." "And if it does?" Nathan pressed. "What then?" "Then we learn something valuable about interspecies communication," Dr. Chen said simply. "Perhaps there's something in a baby's laughter, a certain frequency or pattern, that transcends species boundaries. Something that speaks to the limbic system, the emotional brain, in a way adult voices cannot." Before the conversation could continue, they were interrupted by the arrival of a teenage girl with long brown hair, wearing noise-canceling headphones around her neck. She moved with a careful deliberation, her eyes focused somewhere beyond the group rather than on them directly. "Sophie," Michael said warmly, his face lighting up. "I didn't think you were joining us today." The girl, Michael's granddaughter, Nathan realized, made a subtle hand gesture that seemed to have meaning for Michael. "Sophie says she felt she needed to be here," Michael translated, though Nathan hadn't seen the girl's lips move. "She communicates primarily through a modified sign language we developed together," he explained, seeing their confusion. Sophie's gaze finally settled on Ellie, and something changed in her expression. A softening. a spark of interest. She approached slowly and crouched down to the baby's level, still maintaining a respectful distance. Ellie, who had been growing restless during the adult conversation, immediately focused on Sophie. The two regarded each other with an intensity that seemed beyond ordinary curiosity. Then, to everyone's surprise, Sophie slowly extended her hand, palm up, not to touch Ellie, but as an invitation of some kind. Without hesitation, Ellie placed Mr. Hops in Sophie's open palm. "Oh my goodness," Olivia whispered. "She never gives him to anyone willingly." Sophie examined the stuffed rabbit carefully, her fingers tracing the worn blue fur with extraordinary gentleness. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small and colorful, a delicate origami butterfly made of orange and black paper. She offered it to Ellie, who accepted it with a squeal of delight. "That's remarkable," Rebecca murmured, watching the exchange. Sophie doesn't usually interact with strangers at all, let alone share her origami. Nathan suddenly made a connection. The butterfly. Is it meant to represent the monarch that was with Ellie in the park? Sophie looked up at him directly for the first time, and Nathan was struck by the intensity of her gaze. She nodded once, then made several more hand gestures to her grandfather. Michael watched her signs with a thoughtful expression. "Sophie says the butterfly is a messenger," he translated slowly. "It recognizes Ellie as a bridge." He looked apologetically at Nathan and Olivia. "I'm not entirely sure what she means. Sophie often speaks in metaphors that make sense to her but are difficult for others to interpret." Dr. Winters, who had been quietly observing until now, stepped forward. "Perhaps we should move on to see Timber. I know he's been quite agitated since returning to the sanctuary. It might be informative to see if he recognizes Ellie." As they walked toward the bare enclosures, Nathan found himself walking alongside Rebecca, who had been taking notes in a small notebook. "I thought this wasn't a professional visit for you," he commented. Rebecca looked up, slightly flustered. "Oh, this isn't for an article. I've been documenting Sophie's interactions with the animals for Michael, just as a favor, not as a journalist. She has the most extraordinary effect on them, but since she doesn't communicate conventionally, I help record her methods and results. You seem very involved with the sanctuary for someone who's just a relative of an employee," Nathan observed. A shadow crossed Rebecca's face. "The sanctuary saved my life," she said quietly. "Literally. I was attacked by a mountain lion while hiking 3 years ago. Marcus was already working here, and they had specialized medical equipment and antivenins that the local hospital didn't have. While I was recovering, I started helping out and—" She shrugged. "It became a second home." Before Nathan could respond, they arrived at a large enclosure set slightly apart from the others. A sign identified it as Timber's Den, and through the protective glass they could see the bear they had encountered in the park. He was pacing back and forth along one wall, occasionally standing on his hind legs to scratch at the reinforced glass. "He's been like this since returning," Michael explained, concern evident in his voice. "No interest in enrichment activities, minimal appetite, constant pacing. Our wildlife behaviorist believes he may be experiencing something akin to post-traumatic stress from the incident." Ellie, who had been contentedly playing with the origami butterfly in Olivia's arms, suddenly looked up at the mention of Timber's name. "Bear!" she exclaimed, pointing excitedly at the enclosure. At the sound of her voice, Timber froze mid-pace. His massive head swung toward the viewing area, nostrils flaring as he tested the air. When he spotted Ellie, a visible change came over him. The agitated pacing stopped. His aggressive posture relaxed. He approached the glass slowly, almost cautiously. Extraordinary, Dr. Chen murmured, making notes on her tablet. He's recognized her immediately. Ellie squirmed in Olivia's arms, clearly wanting to get closer to the glass. After a moment's hesitation, Olivia approached the viewing area, keeping a firm grip on her daughter. "It's okay, sweet pea. See the bear? That's Timber." Ellie placed her tiny hand against the glass, and to everyone's astonishment, Timber mirrored the gesture, placing his enormous paw gently against the barrier directly opposite her hand. The contrast was striking, the massive bear's paw dwarfing the baby's hand, yet connected by some invisible understanding. Then Ellie laughed, that same musical sound that had first captured the bear's attention in the park. Timber made a soft chuffing noise in response, a sound that Michael identified as a positive, contented vocalization rarely heard from distressed bears. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Winters said, his professional detachment slipping as he watched the interaction. "It's as if they're communicating on a completely different level." Sophie, who had been hanging back, suddenly moved forward to stand beside Ellie at the glass. She made a series of gestures that caused Timber to tilt his head curiously. To everyone's surprise, the bear responded with his own movement, rolling onto his back in a playful posture that Michael identified as extremely unusual behavior for an adult male bear. "Sophie says Ellie is speaking the old language," Michael translated, his voice hushed with wonder. The language from before words. The moment was interrupted by a sudden commotion from outside. A loud vehicle engine, doors slamming, and voices calling out in authoritative tones. Dr. Chen hurried to a nearby window and her expression grew alarmed. "It's the Wildlife Enforcement Division," she said tersely. "And they've brought reporters." Michael's face paled. How did they know about today's visit? All eyes turned instinctively to Rebecca, who looked genuinely shocked. "It wasn't me," she insisted. "I didn't tell anyone." But Nathan noticed something that made his stomach twist with apprehension. The origami butterfly Sophie had given to Ellie was now perched unnaturally still on his daughter's shoulder, as if it were monitoring everything happening around them. And outside the window, hovering near the group of officials and media personnel now approaching the sanctuary's main entrance, was a very familiar monarch butterfly. "We need to get Ellie out of here," Nathan said, a protective instinct flaring in his chest. "Something isn't right." Dr. Chen nodded grimly. "Follow me. We have a back entrance that leads directly to the staff parking area." As they hurried through a series of corridors, Michael explained in hushed tones, "The Wildlife Enforcement Division has been trying to shut us down for years. They claim our research methods are unorthodox and that we're keeping animals that should be euthanized according to their protocols." "But why bring reporters?" Olivia asked, holding Ellie tightly against her chest. The baby was clutching both Mr. Hops and Sophie's origami butterfly, seemingly oblivious to the adult's tension. "Public opinion," Rebecca said grimly. "If they can make the sanctuary look dangerous or irresponsible in the media, it's easier to revoke our permits." Sophie, who had been following silently, suddenly stopped and made an urgent series of hand gestures to her grandfather. "She says we can't leave yet," Michael translated, his expression troubled. "She says Ellie needs to see the others first." "What others?" Nathan demanded. But their conversation was interrupted by a loud voice echoing through the corridor behind them. "Dr. Chen, we have a warrant to inspect these premises immediately." Dr. Chen muttered something under her breath that sounded like a curse. "Too late. They're already inside." She turned to the Reeds. "I am so sorry about this. I promise we had no intention of exposing your family to this kind of situation." "What exactly is going on here?" Nathan asked, his voice hard with suspicion. First, the bear in the park, then the butterflies, now government officials with reporters in tow. This feels less like coincidence and more like we've been manipulated into something. Before anyone could respond, the corridor door behind them burst open. A stern-looking woman in a wildlife enforcement uniform stood framed in the doorway, flanked by 2 officers and followed by several people with cameras and notepads. "Ah, Dr. Chen." "Attempting to hide evidence?" the woman said coolly. Her gaze swept over the group, landing on Ellie with a flash of recognition. "And the Reed family. How interesting to find you here." "Director Blackwood," Dr. Chen acknowledged stiffly. "We have nothing to hide. We were simply providing a private tour to the Reed family, who experienced a unique interaction with one of our rescue bears recently." "Yes, I'm well aware of the incident," Director Blackwood said, her lips curving into a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "In fact, that incident is precisely why we're here today. Taking a dangerous predator to a public park, allowing it to approach a child, and now bringing that same child into close proximity with multiple predators? This goes beyond irresponsible, Dr. Chen. It's criminal endangerment." "That's not what happened," Olivia protested. "Timber escaped accidentally, and he never harmed Ellie. In fact, he protected her." Director Blackwood's eyebrow arched skeptically. "A wild bear protected your child?" "Mrs. Reed, I understand you've been through a traumatic experience, but surely you don't actually believe that." "I saw it with my own eyes," Nathan insisted. "We all did. There are dozens of witnesses, videos that show a dangerous animal approaching a defenseless child," Director Blackwood cut in. "Videos that show this facility's complete failure to properly secure a predator. And now we find you've brought your child back for what? More dangerous encounters?" One of the reporters pushed forward, microphone extended. "Mr. and Mrs. Reed, do you feel your daughter is being exploited by the sanctuary for publicity? Are you concerned for her safety?" "This is absurd," Dr. Winters interjected. "The Reeds are here as guests, observing our research protocols from a safe distance. At no point has Ellie been in any danger." Director Blackwood snapped her fingers, and one of her officers handed her a tablet. "According to our information, you were planning to use this child as some sort of animal whisperer in experiments with aggressive rescue animals. Is that correct, Dr. Chen?" Dr. Chen's face flushed with anger. "That is a gross mischaracterization of our research proposal. We were interested in observing whether the vocalizations of young children might have calming effects on certain animals, all from behind proper safety barriers." "Where did you get that information?" Michael demanded. "Our research proposals are confidential and have to go through proper review channels." A flicker of something, triumph, perhaps, crossed Director Blackwood's face. "Let's just say we have our sources." Her gaze drifted briefly to Rebecca, then away again so quickly that Nathan wasn't sure if he'd imagined it. Throughout this heated exchange, Sophie had been growing visibly agitated, her hands moving in increasingly urgent patterns that Michael was too distracted to translate. Finally, she tapped her grandfather's arm insistently and pointed down the hallway toward a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." "Not now, Sophie," Michael murmured, but the girl's expression grew desperate. She made a series of emphatic gestures, punctuating them with unusual vocalizations that clearly surprised her grandfather. "What is she trying to say?" Olivia asked softly. Michael hesitated, then turned to Dr. Chen. "Sophie says we need to show them the truth before it's too late. She wants to take Ellie to the special research area." Dr. Chen's eyes widened. "Michael, we can't. Not with enforcement officers present. The implications could be—" "What special research area?" Director Blackwood interrupted, her interest clearly piqued. Is there a section of this facility not included in your official floor plans? It's not what you think, Dr. Chen said quickly. It's simply a quiet observation area for our most sensitive cases, animals that require minimal human contact. But Director Blackwood was already signaling to her officers. I want that area inspected immediately. And I want these civilians removed from the premises for their own safety. Wait, Nathan said suddenly, a strange idea forming in his mind. He looked at the origami butterfly still clutched in Ellie's hand, then at Sophie's desperate expression. I think we should see this area. If there's nothing to hide, then transparency is the best approach, isn't it? Dr. Chen stared at him in disbelief. Mr. Reed, I don't think you understand what you're suggesting. Maybe I don't, Nathan admitted. But I trust Sophie, and if she believes Ellie needs to see whatever is in there, then, as Ellie's father, I want to know why. A tense silence fell over the group. Finally, Dr. Chen nodded reluctantly. Very well, but I want it on record that this was not our preferred protocol. She led the now expanded group, the Reeds, Michael, Sophie, Doctor, Winters, Rebecca, Director Blackwood, her officers and the media crew, down the corridor to the restricted door. After entering a complex security code, the door slid open to reveal a dimly lit antechamber. Before we proceed, Dr. Chen said formally, I must insist that no photographs or recordings be taken beyond this point. The animals in this section are extremely sensitive to stimuli. Director Blackwood looked like she wanted to object, but something in Dr. Chen's tone must have convinced her of the seriousness of the request. She nodded curtly to the reporters, who reluctantly powered down their equipment. As they passed through the antechamber, Nathan noticed something strange. The walls were covered in an intricate pattern that, upon closer inspection, appeared to be thousands of butterfly images. Not just monarchs, but countless species, each rendered in painstaking detail. What is this place? He murmured to Dr. Winters, who was walking beside him. The veterinarian's voice was barely above a whisper. We call it the nexus. It's where Sophie does most of her work. Beyond the antechamber lay a vast circular room with a domed ceiling. The space was divided into sections by transparent barriers, each containing a different habitat. Forest, desert, tundra, grassland, even a small aquatic environment. And in each habitat was an animal, perfectly still, watching their entrance with an unnerving intensity. What you're about to witness is highly classified research, Dr. Chen announced, her professional demeanor firmly back in place. Black Mountain Sanctuary isn't just a wildlife rehabilitation center. It's also the headquarters of the Interspecies Communication Initiative, a government-funded program studying the potential for meaningful communication between humans and other species. Director Blackwood's confident expression faltered. What are you talking about? There is no such government initiative. Not through your department, no, Dr. Chen agreed. Our funding comes directly through the Department of Defense. That's preposterous, Director Blackwood scoffed. Why would the DoD care about talking to animals? Instead of answering, Doctor, Chen turned to Sophie. Would you like to demonstrate? The teenage girl nodded, then moved to the center of the room where a small platform was located. She closed her eyes, removed her noise-canceling headphones, and spread her arms slightly. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the animals in their separate enclosures began to move in synchronized patterns. A wolf pacing in perfect circles, an eagle flying in a precise figure 8, a small fox digging in exactly the same spot its enclosure mate had just vacated. Sophie doesn't just communicate with animals, Michael explained quietly. She coordinates them, directs them. It's a form of nonverbal communication we still don't fully understand. This is some kind of trick, Director Blackwood insisted, but her voice lacked conviction as she watched the uncanny display. Sophie opened her eyes and lowered her arms. The animals immediately returned to their normal behaviors. She turned toward Ellie and made a beckoning gesture. She wants Ellie to join her, Michael interpreted. Olivia clutched her daughter protectively. I don't know about this, but Ellie was already squirming to get down, her eyes fixed on Sophie with an expression of recognition that seemed impossible between a teenager and a baby who had just met. It's safe, Doctor, Chen assured them. The platform is surrounded by a force field that prevents any unauthorized approach by the animals, even in the highly unlikely event that one escaped its enclosure. After a moment of silent communication with Nathan, Olivia reluctantly set Ellie down. The baby immediately toddled toward Sophie with more steadiness than she usually displayed when walking. When she reached the platform, Sophie gently took her hand. What happened next defied explanation. The origami butterfly in Ellie's other hand began to glow with a soft orange light. Simultaneously, every butterfly image on the antechamber walls pulsed with the same luminescence. The animals in their enclosures grew completely still, their attention fixed on the two children at the center of the room. And then, from every corner of the facility, real butterflies began to emerge. Hundreds of them, thousands perhaps, in every color imaginable, converging on the platform in a swirling, living kaleidoscope that enveloped Sophie and Ellie in a gentle vortex of wings. "My God," whispered one of the reporters, protocol forgotten as she raised her phone to capture the impossible scene. Through the curtain of butterflies, they could see Sophie and Ellie facing each other, their joined hands raised. Sophie's free hand moved in fluid gestures while Ellie watched with rapt attention. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Ellie's tiny hand began to mirror the movements, not randomly, but with purpose, as if she understood what she was doing. "She's teaching her," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sophie is teaching Ellie the language." "What language?" Nathan managed to ask, unable to tear his eyes away from his daughter. "The first language," came a new voice, soft, melodic, and completely unfamiliar. The language all creatures once shared before humans forgot how to listen. It took Nathan several seconds to realize who had spoken. Sophie, the girl who communicated only through sign language, had just uttered perfectly formed words. Michael staggered slightly, gripping the nearest railing for support. "Sophie, you're speaking?" The girl didn't take her eyes off Ellie, but she nodded. "Only here, only now. The convergence creates a bridge." "Convergence?" Dr. Chen repeated, her scientific skepticism warring with the evidence before her eyes. "Once in a generation, a human child is born who remembers the old ways," Sophie continued, her voice flowing as naturally as if she'd been speaking all her life. "I am one. Ellie is another. When we connect, the barrier between worlds thins." "What barrier?" Director Blackwood demanded, her authoritarian manner crumbling in the face of the inexplicable. "What worlds?" Sophie finally turned to look at the assembled adults, her eyes reflecting the butterfly light in mesmerizing patterns. The world of human thought and the world of animal knowing. They were never meant to be separate. The division is recent, only a few thousand years. Before that, all creatures communicated freely. "That's not possible, Doctor," Winters said, though he sounded unsure. "Humans and animals have different brain structures, different vocal capabilities." "Words are new," Sophie interrupted gently. "Before words, there was meaning. Direct transmission of intent and emotion. It's still there, buried in your oldest brain structures. Babies can access it because they haven't yet fully committed to words. Some neurodivergent humans, like me, retain partial access throughout our lives. The butterflies continued their hypnotic dance around the two children. Ellie giggled, that same musical sound that had calmed Timber, and the butterflies pulsed brighter in response. The laugh, Olivia realized. That's what the animals respond to in Ellie, isn't it? It's not just a pleasant sound to them, it means something. Sophie nodded. Joy is the purest emotion, recognized across all species boundaries. When Ellie laughs, she broadcasts pure joy in the old language. No creature with a limbic system can resist it. This is why you wanted us to bring Ellie here today, Nathan said to Michael, not just to observe her effect on the animals, but because you knew she and Sophie were connected somehow. I suspected, Michael admitted, when Sophie became so insistent about meeting Ellie after the incident with Timber. But I had no idea it would manifest like this. He gestured to the butterfly spectacle and his speaking granddaughter. Director Blackwood had been watching the exchange with growing understanding. This is why you've been protecting this place so fiercely, she said to Dr. Chen. Not just for the animals, but for Sophie. You're studying her abilities. Not studying, Doctor. Chen corrected. Supporting. Nurturing. Sophie came to us 10 years ago, already demonstrating remarkable abilities with animals. We've simply provided a safe environment where she can develop those abilities without exploitation. One of the reporters who had been furiously taking notes looked up. And the Department of Defense funds this because interspecies communication has profound implications for everything from disaster prediction to environmental restoration, Dr. Chen explained. Animals perceive the world in ways humans cannot. They detect earthquakes before they happen, sense chemical imbalances in ecosystems, navigate using magnetic fields. If humans could tap into that knowledge, the reporter's eyes widened with realization. Exactly, Dr. Chen nodded. But our research has always been centered on mutual benefit, finding ways for humans and animals to coexist more harmoniously, not exploiting animal capabilities for human gain. Throughout this conversation, the butterfly dome around Sophie and Ellie had been growing more intense, the light brighter, the movements more complex. Now, Sophie gently disengaged her hand from Ellie's and turned to face the adult onlookers fully. I've shown Ellie what she needs to know, she announced. The rest will come to her naturally as she grows. She looked directly at Olivia and Nathan. Your daughter has a rare gift. She will need guidance and protection. From what? Olivia asked, her maternal instincts flaring. Not all who seek the old knowledge do so for benevolent reasons, Sophie said gravely. There are those who would use children like us as tools, weapons even. Her gaze shifted to Director Blackwood, who had the grace to look uncomfortable under the teenager's penetrating stare. Your department isn't really concerned about public safety, is it, Director? Sophie said softly. You're here because your superiors learned of Ellie's abilities after the incident with Timber went viral. You want to evaluate her potential as an asset. Director Blackwood's face flushed. That's absurd. I'm here conducting a legitimate inspection of a wildlife facility that has repeatedly violated safety protocols. Then why did you bring reporters? Sophie pressed. Why time your inspection precisely when Ellie would be here? Why plant listening devices in the Reed home after the incident? What? Nathan looked sharply at Director Blackwood. You bugged our house? The director's composure cracked slightly. I don't know what this girl is talking about. These are wild accusations without evidence. Sophie tilted her head, considering. The butterfly on your lapel pin. It's not just a decorative choice, is it? It's a transmitter. All eyes turned to the small silver butterfly pinned to Director Blackwood's uniform collar, an uncharacteristically delicate accessory for the stern official. Dr. Winters stepped forward, a small device in his hand. "May I?" Without waiting for permission, he held the device near the pin. It emitted a quiet but distinct beeping sound. "It's generating a signal," he confirmed, looking troubled. "Sophisticated technology for a simple wildlife enforcement officer." "Who do you really work for, Director?" Dr. Chen demanded. Before Blackwood could respond, Sophie suddenly stiffened, her expression alarmed. "They're coming," she announced. "They've been monitoring the energy signature from the convergence. We have to protect Ellie." "Who's coming?" Nathan demanded, moving toward his daughter. The answer came in the form of a deafening alarm that suddenly blared throughout the facility. One of Director Blackwood's officers burst through the antechamber doors, his face pale with panic. "Director, we have multiple unmarked helicopters approaching. They're demanding immediate access to the facility." Director Blackwood's expression shifted from defensive to genuinely alarmed. "I didn't authorize this," she said, and for the first time she sounded sincere. "This isn't part of our operation." Sophie's butterflies scattered in agitation, swirling around the room in chaotic patterns. She grabbed Ellie's hand and pulled her gently but firmly from the platform. "We need to get to the sanctuary," she said urgently. "The animals will protect us." "The sanctuary?" Rebecca repeated. "You mean the animal enclosures?" "No," Michael said, understanding dawning on his weathered face. "She means the real sanctuary, the hidden one." Dr. Chen crossed to a control panel and pressed her palm against a scanner. A hidden door slid open in the far wall. "This leads to our emergency evacuation route," she explained rapidly. "It connects to a natural cave system beneath the mountain." The sound of helicopter rotors grew louder overhead. The building's alarm system continued its urgent wailing. "We don't have much time," Dr. Chen continued. "Sophie, take Ellie and the Reeds through the tunnel. Michael, you guide them to the inner sanctuary. The rest of us will remain here to deal with the intruders and buy you time." "I'm not leaving my brother," Rebecca protested. "And I'm not letting an unidentified baby and a teenager who talks to butterflies out of my sight," Director Blackwood added firmly. "Not until I understand what's really happening here." Sophie fixed them both with a penetrating stare. "Your brother will be safer if you go with us," she told Rebecca. Then, to Director Blackwood, "And you'll get your answers faster if you come than if you stay. But we must go now." Without waiting for further debate, Sophie lifted Ellie into her arms and headed for the tunnel entrance. Nathan and Olivia hurried after them, unwilling to be separated from their daughter. After a moment's hesitation, Michael, Rebecca, and, somewhat surprisingly, Director Blackwood followed. As they passed through the doorway into a rough-hewn stone passage, Nathan looked back one last time. Dr. Chen and Dr. Winters were already engaged in what appeared to be emergency lockdown procedures, while the confused reporters were being herded toward a different exit by security personnel. The tunnel door slid shut behind them with a pneumatic hiss, cutting off the alarm and plunging them into semi-darkness, illuminated only by soft blue guide lights embedded in the floor. "Stay close," Michael instructed, taking the lead. "The path branches several times, and it's easy to get lost if you don't know the way." As they hurried deeper into the earth, the sounds of chaos from above gradually faded. Ellie, still in Sophie's arms, seemed remarkably calm, occasionally reaching out to touch the stone walls with curious fingers. "Who's after us?" Nathan demanded, as they navigated a particularly narrow section of tunnel. "What do they want with Ellie?" The same thing people have always wanted from those who speak the old language, Sophie replied, her voice echoing slightly in the confined space. Control over the natural world. Imagine commanding flocks of birds to disable surveillance systems, or directing burrowing animals to access secure facilities, or using sea creatures to sabotage underwater infrastructure. That's science fiction, Director Blackwood scoffed, though she sounded less certain than before. Is it? Sophie challenged mildly. You've seen what I can do with a relatively small group of rescue animals. What do you think someone with full mastery of the old language could accomplish with entire ecosystems at their disposal? They emerged into a larger cavern where the path split in 3 directions. Michael paused, considering, then pointed to the rightmost tunnel. This way, we're nearly there. Nearly where exactly? Olivia asked, breathless from the pace and the tension. What is this inner sanctuary? It's where it all began, Michael said cryptically. The place where Sophie first demonstrated her abilities, where we first understood what was possible. They followed the tunnel as it curved gradually upward, eventually opening into a breathtaking underground grotto. A natural skylight far above allowed sunlight to filter down, illuminating a lush micro-ecosystem thriving in apparent isolation from the outside world. A small waterfall trickled down one wall into a clear pool. Flowering plants and small trees grew from cracks in the stone. And everywhere, on branches, rocks, flowers, and hovering in the air, were butterflies of every imaginable variety. But it wasn't just butterflies. As they ventured further into the grotto, they began to notice other animals. Birds perched on branches. Small mammals watching curiously from hollows in the rock walls. Reptiles basking on sun-warmed stones. All living together in impossible harmony. Welcome, Sophie said simply, to where the worlds still touch. She set Ellie down gently. The baby immediately toddled toward the pool, seemingly drawn to its sparkling surface. A pair of otters playing at the water's edge paused to watch her approach, then deliberately swam closer, as if inviting her to join their game. This is impossible, Director Blackwood whispered, her official demeanor completely dissolved in the face of what she was witnessing. Predator and prey species coexisting like this, it violates every principle of natural behavior. Natural behavior as defined by humans who can no longer hear the old language, Michael corrected gently. What you're seeing is nature's original design, cooperation alongside competition, harmony alongside struggle. Rebecca was moving slowly around the perimeter of the grotto, her journalist's eyes taking in every detail. How long has this place existed? How did you find it? We didn't find it, Michael said. Sophie led us to it when she was 7 years old. She walked into the woods one day and didn't come home. We searched for hours before finding her at the surface entrance to this cave system, surrounded by animals that should have been either fleeing from or attacking each other. The butterflies came first, Sophie added, watching as a brilliant blue morpho landed delicately on Ellie's outstretched finger, making the baby giggle with delight. They've always been the messengers, the bridges between worlds. They recognize children like Ellie and me because we still vibrate at the right frequency to hear them. Director Blackwood had moved to the edge of the pool, staring into its crystal depths with a troubled expression. If what you're saying is true, if humans once had this ability but lost it, why? Why would we abandon something so valuable? It wasn't abandoned, Sophie said, approaching to stand beside her. It was sacrificed. Early humans faced a choice between developing complex symbolic language, words, writing, abstract concepts, and maintaining their connection to the old language. The brain couldn't support both systems equally. Words won. "But you and Ellie somehow have both," Olivia observed, watching her daughter interact effortlessly with the various creatures approaching her. Sophie nodded. "Some humans are born with the neural pathways for both languages still intact. It's rare, becoming rarer with each generation as human brains evolve to prioritize word-based thought." She looked down at her hands. "Outside this place, the old language is harder for me to access. That's why I use signs instead of speech. But here, where the barrier is thin, I can translate between worlds." A sudden commotion at the tunnel entrance interrupted their conversation. Two of Director Blackwood's officers emerged, breathing heavily as if they'd been running. "Director!" one called urgently. "The facility has been breached. Armed personnel identifying themselves as Homeland Security have taken control of the main building. They're demanding access to what they're calling the subjects." Blackwood's face hardened. "Homeland Security has no jurisdiction here. Who authorized this operation?" "They mentioned something called Project Monarch," the officer reported. "They have documentation signed by the Secretary of Defense himself." Michael and Dr. Chen exchanged alarmed glances. "Project Monarch was discontinued years ago," Michael said, "after the ethical violations came to light." "What ethical violations?" Nathan demanded. "What is Project Monarch?" Before anyone could answer, a new sound echoed through the grotto, the unmistakable report of gunfire from somewhere in the tunnel system. "They're getting closer," Sophie said calmly. "We don't have much time." She turned to Ellie, who was now sitting by the pool, surrounded by a circle of attentive animals: the otters, several rabbits, a fox, and countless butterflies. To everyone's astonishment, the baby appeared to be communicating with them, her hands moving in simplified versions of the gestures they had seen Sophie use. "She learns quickly," Sophie observed with a proud smile. "Faster than I did." "What exactly are you teaching her?" Olivia asked, a mixture of wonder and concern in her voice. "How to call for help," Sophie replied simply. Then, raising her own hands, she began a complex series of fluid movements that seemed to ripple through the air like visible sound waves. In response, every creature in the grotto went still for a moment, listening, receiving. Then, as if responding to a silent command, they began to move with purpose. The birds took flight, streaming upward through the skylight. The land animals converged on the tunnel entrances, arranging themselves in what could only be described as defensive formations. And the butterflies, thousands upon thousands of them, swirled into tight, organized patterns above their heads. "What are you doing?" Director Blackwood asked, her voice hushed with awe and trepidation. "Calling reinforcements," Sophie answered. "The animals will delay the intruders while we get Ellie to safety." "Safety where?" Nathan asked. "If these people have government authorization, where can we possibly hide?" Sophie turned to him with a serene smile. "Not hide, Mr. Reed. Escape. There's another world touching this one. A world where the old language never faded, where humans and animals still speak as equals. We call it the other side." "You're talking about another dimension?" Rebecca asked incredulously. "Like in science fiction?" "Like in reality," Sophie corrected. "The boundaries between worlds have always been permeable for those who know how to cross them. The indigenous peoples of this continent understood this. So did the ancient cultures of every inhabited landmass. It's only modern humans who've convinced themselves there is only one reality." The sound of shouting and more gunfire echoed from the tunnels, closer now. Whatever delay the animals were creating wouldn't last much longer. "We don't have time for a metaphysics debate," Michael said urgently. Sophie, if there's a way out of here that doesn't involve confronting armed government agents, now would be the time to reveal it." Sophie nodded and approached the pool at the center of the grotto. "Water has always been the easiest gateway," she explained, kneeling at the edge. "It exists simultaneously in multiple states, solid, liquid, gas, making it naturally liminal." She dipped her fingers into the crystal water and began to move them in precise patterns beneath the surface. As she did, the pool began to glow with an otherworldly blue-green light that seemed to emanate from its depths rather than reflect from above. "This is insane," Director Blackwood muttered, but she made no move to interfere. The light grew brighter, pulsating with a rhythm that somehow matched the beating of Nathan's heart. He could feel it resonating in his chest, a sensation both alien and strangely familiar, like a long-forgotten melody suddenly remembered. "The gateway is opening," Sophie announced, her voice taking on a musical quality that echoed around the grotto. "We must enter the water together. Hold on to each other and do not let go, no matter what you experience." "Enter the water?" Olivia repeated, clutching Ellie protectively. "You want us to take our baby into a glowing interdimensional portal?" Sophie looked at her with compassion. "I understand your fear, Mrs. Reed, but I promise you, the other side is safe for Ellie, safer than remaining here. She belongs there as much as she belongs here." The sounds of pursuit grew louder. They could now hear voices calling out directions, the beam of flashlights visible in the tunnel entrance. "We're out of options," Nathan realized. "Whatever is through that pool, it has to be better than armed men who want to use our daughter as a weapon." Olivia met his eyes, a silent communication passing between them. Then she nodded once, decisively. "All right, we'll go." "All of us?" Rebecca asked, looking uncertainly at the glowing pool. "All who choose to," Sophie clarified. "The gateway will close once we pass through. Those who remain will need to find their own answers." Director Blackwood had been unusually quiet, her gaze fixed on the mesmerizing light of the pool. Now she straightened her uniform jacket in a gesture of resumed authority. "As the ranking government official present, I should investigate this phenomenon first, to ensure it's safe." Before anyone could object, she stepped forward and placed one foot in the glowing water. A look of profound wonder transformed her face. I can hear," she whispered. Then, without further hesitation, she plunged fully into the pool and disappeared beneath its luminous surface. "Well, that's a twist I didn't see coming," Rebecca murmured. Sophie smiled knowingly. "The old language calls most strongly to those who have most thoroughly forgotten it." She turned to the others. "We must go now. Together." Michael moved to his granddaughter's side, taking her hand. Rebecca joined them after only a moment's hesitation. Nathan and Olivia approached the pool's edge, Ellie securely in her mother's arms. Just as they were about to step into the water, the first of the pursuers burst into the grotto. Men in tactical gear with weapons raised. "Freeze! Government agents! Step away from the water!" But it was too late. Sophie had already clasped hands with Nathan, completing their circle. As one, they stepped into the glowing pool. The sensation was indescribable, like falling and flying simultaneously, like being unmade and remade in the same breath. Colors no human eye had ever perceived washed over them. Sounds beyond the range of human hearing sang in their bones. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the journey ended. They found themselves standing in what appeared to be the same grotto, but subtly transformed. The colors were more vivid, the air charged with a vibrant energy that tingled against the skin. And everywhere, on every surface, in every shadow, floating on the very air itself, were butterflies of impossible beauty, their wings patterned with what looked like living script in an unknown language. "Welcome," Sophie said, her voice now rich with harmonics that hadn't been present before, "to the other side, where the old language never died, and all creatures still remember how to speak with one voice." Ellie, still in Olivia's arms, looked around with bright, curious eyes. Then she laughed, that pure musical sound that had first captivated Timber in the park. But here, in this place, her laughter seemed to materialize in the air as visible ripples of golden light that spread outward in concentric circles. In response, from every direction came answering calls. Birds, mammals, insects, even the plants themselves seemed to sway in acknowledgement. It was a chorus of welcome, a symphony of recognition. "She is home," Sophie said simply. "We all are." And as the golden light of Ellie's laughter continued to spread through this new world, Nathan realized with absolute certainty that their lives had changed forever. The boundaries between human and animal, between word and meaning, between one world and another, all had been irrevocably blurred. Whatever lay ahead in this strange new reality, one thing was clear: they would face it together, speaking the old language that had never truly been lost, only temporarily forgotten. In his daughter's joyful eyes, Nathan could see the future unfolding. A future where the divide between species might finally begin to heal, where the innocent laughter of a child could remind even the wildest heart of its capacity for gentleness. Days became weeks, and weeks became months as the Reed family adapted to life on the other side. The world they had discovered was not merely a mirror of their own, but a place where the boundaries between all living things remained fluid and permeable. Here, the hierarchy that placed humans above all other creatures had never taken root. Instead, a delicate balance existed, a collaboration of species where each brought their unique strengths to the greater community. Ellie flourished beyond anything her parents could have imagined. By her second birthday, she was conversing fluently in both human language and the ancient communication system Sophie had taught her. She spent her days surrounded by creatures that would have been mortal enemies in the human world, but here moved in harmonious concert. Bears served as her playmates and protectors. Birds brought her interesting objects from distant parts of this realm. Even the smallest insects seemed to recognize her special role as a bridge between worlds. "She belongs here in a way we may never fully understand," Olivia confessed to Nathan one evening as they watched their daughter sleeping peacefully. A family of fox kits curled protectively around her. "Sometimes I feel like we were simply the vessels meant to deliver her to this place." Nathan nodded, thoughtful. "Yet, she's still our daughter, human, and something more." Sophie had become Ellie's primary teacher, guiding the young child's extraordinary abilities with the wisdom of someone who had walked between worlds her entire life. Under her tutelage, Ellie learned not just to communicate with animals, but to see the intricate connections between all living things, the invisible threads of energy that bound plant to insect to bird to mammal in an endless dance of mutual dependence. Michael had adapted to their new reality with surprising ease for a man of his years. "I always felt out of place in our world," he admitted, "too slow, too observant, too willing to believe there was more to reality than what most people perceived. Here, those aren't limitations, they're strengths." Rebecca had transformed her journalist's curiosity into the role of chronicler, documenting the wonders of the other side in journals she kept with meticulous care. "Someone should record this," she explained when Nathan questioned her constant note-taking. "Even if no one from our world ever reads it, this story deserves to be told." And Director Blackwood, whom they now knew simply as Catherine, had undergone perhaps the most profound transformation of all. The stern enforcement officer had dissolved like morning mist, revealing a woman whose childhood connection to animals had been systematically suppressed by a pragmatic father who saw her gift as dangerous fantasy. Here, those long-dormant abilities had reawakened, and she had become one of Ellie's most devoted guardians. I was sent to contain her, Catherine confessed one day as they watched Ellie and Sophie communicating with a circle of ancient bears much larger than Timber had been. But I think I was always meant to protect her instead. Not everything was idyllic. They all experienced moments of bone-deep homesickness for the world they had left behind. Nathan missed the simple pleasure of watching baseball games with friends. Olivia longed for her parents, for the family who would never know what had become of their daughter and granddaughter. They had all left people they loved, lives they had built, memories that now existed only in a world they might never see again. But whenever these shadows of grief threatened to overwhelm them, Ellie's laughter would ring out across the landscape, golden and pure, reminding them of why they had chosen this path. On the anniversary of their arrival on the other side, Sophie led them to a new location, a high cliff overlooking a vast, shimmering ocean unlike any they had seen before. The water seemed alive with consciousness, patterns of light moving beneath its surface in what Nathan now recognized as the visible manifestation of the old language. "There's something I need to show you," Sophie said, more serious than usual. "Something about Ellie and about all of us." She guided them to a pool similar to the one they had used to cross between worlds, but instead of the blue-green glow of a portal, this water reflected images, scenes from the world they had left behind. "A window, not a door," Sophie explained as they gathered around the pool's edge. "We can see, but not return." The images shifted and clarified, revealing the Black Mountain Sanctuary, or what remained of it. The buildings had been repurposed, emblazoned with government seals they didn't recognize. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. "Project Monarch was reinstated after our escape," Sophie said quietly. "They're still searching for children with the gift." The scene shifted again, showing Dr. Chen and Dr. Winters in what appeared to be a secure facility, working under obvious duress. They were examining children brought to them by stern-faced officials, testing for the abilities Sophie and Ellie possessed. "They resist in whatever ways they can," Sophie assured them, seeing their distress. "They identify false positives, delay findings, protect the children as much as possible." "We have to help them," Olivia insisted, her hand tightening around Nathan's. "We can't just abandon them to fight alone." Sophie nodded, unsurprised by the reaction. "I knew you would feel this way. That's why I've waited until now, until Ellie's abilities had grown strong enough." "Strong enough for what?" Nathan asked, a mixture of hope and apprehension in his voice. "To reopen the gateway," Sophie replied simply. "Not for us to return permanently. That would be too dangerous. But perhaps to create a new kind of bridge." The implications hung in the air between them. A bridge between worlds would mean the possibility of rescue for those left behind, but also the risk of exposure for their sanctuary. "It's not just our decision," Michael cautioned, looking at Ellie, who was watching the reflection pool with unusual seriousness for a child not yet 3. "The consequences affect all who dwell here." As if in response to her grandfather's concern, Ellie stepped forward to the edge of the pool. She knelt and placed her small hand on the water's surface. Ripples spread from her touch, transforming the images in the pool from the grim reality of Project Monarch to a series of faces, children from across the world, each with the same luminous quality in their eyes that Ellie and Sophie shared. "The others," Sophie explained quietly, those born still remembering. Each in danger of discovery, each a potential bridge or weapon depending on who finds them first. Ellie looked up at her parents, her expression impossibly wise for her young face. "Help them," she said simply, her voice carrying harmonics similar to Sophie's, multiple tones layered together like a one-person choir. "Bring them home." Nathan knelt beside his daughter, searching her eyes. "Are you sure, sweetheart? It could be dangerous." Ellie nodded with the absolute certainty only a child can possess. "The butterflies told me. It's why I was born." The simplicity of her statement brought tears to Olivia's eyes. She joined her family at the pool's edge, completing their circle. "Then we'll find a way." Catherine and Rebecca exchanged a glance, then stepped forward as well. "We're with you," Catherine said, speaking for both of them. "Whatever it takes." Sophie smiled, a look of profound peace settling over her features. "I've waited my whole life for this moment, for enough of us to gather with the same purpose, the same open hearts." She turned to Ellie. "Together, our voices will be strong enough to call across the divide." And so, as the sun set over the strange and beautiful world they now called home, they joined hands around the reflecting pool. Sophie began the ancient gestures of the old language, her movements fluid and graceful. One by one, the others followed, even those like Nathan and Olivia who had no natural gift for it. But it was Ellie who completed the ceremony. Standing on the pool's edge, she threw back her head and laughed. That same pure, joyful sound that had first calmed a frightened bear on what now seemed like a lifetime ago. But here, amplified by the power of the other side, her laughter transformed into visible light that shot upward into the darkening sky like a beacon. In response, butterflies began to appear. Not dozens or hundreds, but millions, emerging from every corner of this world, their wings carrying the living script of the old language. They gathered above the pool, forming a vast, swirling vortex that stretched between earth and sky. And somehow, Nathan knew that on the other side of reality, in parks and playgrounds and backyards across the human world, other children were looking up at butterflies that suddenly seemed to be speaking directly to them. Children who had always felt different, who had always known they could hear voices others couldn't, who had special connections with animals that no one else understood. Children who would now know they weren't alone. "It's beautiful," Olivia whispered, tears streaming down her face as she watched the butterfly column stretch into infinity. "It's just the beginning," Sophie replied, her face radiant with joy. "The old language is returning to your world, one child at a time. The divide that separated humans from the rest of creation is healing." Nathan held his family close as the butterfly beacon continued to pulse with his daughter's laughter. He thought of Timber, the bear who had somehow recognized the bridge builder in Ellie even before any of them understood what was happening. He thought of all the animals in humanity's long history who had tried to communicate with a species that had forgotten how to listen. And he thought of the future, not just for his extraordinary daughter, but for all the children who would follow her path. A future where the simple, pure joy of a baby's laughter might once again be understood by all creatures as what it truly was. An expression of the fundamental connection that bound all living things together in the great, unending conversation of existence. As if sensing his thoughts, Ellie turned in her mother's arms and placed a small hand on her father's cheek. Her eyes, reflecting the light of a million butterfly wings, held wisdom beyond her years. "Don't be sad, Daddy," she said, her voice carrying the harmonics of the old language. "The story isn't ending, it's just beginning again." And Nathan knew with absolute certainty that she was right. What had begun with a bear and a laughing baby in an ordinary park on an ordinary day had opened a door that could never truly be closed again. The old language was awakening. One child, one animal, one butterfly at a time. Sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with the smallest sounds, like the pure, uninhibited laughter of a child who doesn't yet know to be afraid.